I mean, you said quite a few things. I mean, whether or not.
Well, what one? I'm genuinely this whole time. My number one thing that I had in all of this, when you accused me of being an anti-church activist, is I'm sitting there going, "What did I say?"
Well,
you've provided no specifics. This is one of the things that's happened in this. You're right. You said you're not going to? Jim Bennett is an online Latter-day Saint commentator who has some very strong opinions about me.
I don't think anybody is more destructive to people's testimonies than people like you.
I have to be honest. I almost didn't release the interview you're about to watch. And it's not because I'm ashamed of anything I said. And actually, Jim remained pretty calm throughout our interview. Still, as you will see in the video, he publicly makes allegation after allegation against me, my character, my intentions, and every time I asked for something specific I did wrong, nothing was offered. Having someone publicly accuse you of things for 2 hours without any specific examples to back what they are saying is incredibly frustrating. However, I also know that many in the church are becoming increasingly alarmed at just how brazenly people like Jim are when they seem to reject the firm declarations of our leaders.
There is no justification to redefine what marriage is. Such is not our right, and those who try will find themselves answerable to God.
Fine. Have they been clear, Jim, about the definition of marriage being a union between a man and a woman?
Up until the point where they endorsed a legislation that made gay marriage legal in all 50 states.
And what did they say about our doctrine in relation to that? That
doesn't matter. That's the thing. I mean, you're sitting here trying to say they have this immutable position, but
so you think that
the doctrine of the Lord regarding marriage and morality cannot be changed. We cannot change his doctrine. It is not ours to change.
I do know the church will continue to change as it has changed dramatically and drastically over a relatively short period of time in terms of what we teach and what we believe about LGBTQ people and their status.
The reality is that publicly implying the doctrine of marriage might change is to reject the explicit and public declarations of our leaders and scriptures. Implying the doctrine of marriage can change is to imply that our current doctrine of marriage is not true, because if it was true, it wouldn't need to change. It's a point that I try to make clear in this conversation. And so I decided to post this conversation regardless of the attacks on me, because I think that that is a point worth making.
Ding, ding, ding. It's the rematch, ladies and gentlemen, between Jacob Hansen and Jim Bennett. These are two very good friends of mine, and they've asked me to facilitate a conversation today about, issues that are happening in the church. Of course, a couple weeks ago, we had the situation at Fair Mormon where Aaron Sherarian refused to say that the family proclamation is part of the canon or whatever. But this is a very sensitive topic, and of course, many of you know that I myself am a gay man who has, by the way, is not a progressive, nor has advocated for the church to change its stance on marriage. I think people sometimes try to shoehorn me into these things, but I try to be neutral on these issues as well. I also feel that it's really important that we have, during these very difficult times in which we're having cultural wars in our country, it's a very divided society that we live in, and we're trying to model how can we have civil conversations where we have disagreements. Jim Bennett reached out to me and asked to see if we could facilitate this conversation. And so this morning, it's Saturday, August the 16th, at 10:11 a.m. Eastern Time. We all got up early, extra early, so we could have this conversation. Now I'm going to hand it off to Jacob Hansen, and then, of course, we'll have Jim do an opening statement.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for doing this, Steve. And I am the one who is the earliest out of the group. So if I don't look like I'm all fully woken up, it's because it's a little earlier where I am. But no, thank you very much. I actually am very happy to talk with Jim again, and have this conversation. Ultimately, I think there are very important issues here that are dividing members of the church, and I think that we should try our best to explore those, understand one another's positions, and really kind of get deeper into it. And so I guess one of the things that sparked my interest in having this conversation was something that Jim had said online about me, that I've been called a lot of things before by a lot of different people. Usually it's that I'm a shill apologist for the church. Jim was on Twitter and accused me of being a anti-church activist. And so I haven't had that one before. And so I guess, kind of to start it off, I wanted to understand, Jim, maybe kind of what you meant by that, or maybe what specifically I've done that you think merits me being called publicly a anti-church activist.
Sure. Well, that is my sole purpose for being here today. It's the reason I reached out to Steven Pynakker. I might, Steve, you say the ding, ding, ding at the beginning. I'm really not interested in rough and tumble here. Our previous conversation lives in infamy to a large degree. That really isn't my purpose here. My purpose here is to discuss, Jacob, exactly what you're talking about, because what I'm seeing, I felt when Aaron Sherinian was first hired, and I feel now as he's come under attack again, responsibility to defend a good man that I know well. I did not get to know Aaron Sherinian as communications director. I got to know Aaron Sherinian when he was the bishop in my father's ward when my father was dying. And my father suffered a stroke 3 weeks before he passed. He had been battling pancreatic cancer, but it was the stroke that ended up taking his life. And all of his 6 children rallied around his bedside for those last 3 weeks. I was there the entire time, and so was Aaron Sherinian. Aaron Sherinian was there every day. If not Aaron, then Emily Sherinian, his wife. He would bring us tacos. He would come and just sit with us. He would come and just talk to us. The night my father passed away, he was the first person at the door. And he sat there and was there with us and crying with us. So I feel just tremendous affection for this man, and recognize his role as a disciple of Christ. He was the bishop in the ward, but he was every bit as accessible or as down to earth as any other member of the ward, and so when he was initially hired, and one of the other things that I knew, my father and Aaron Sherinian were having conversations professionally. Aaron Sherinian, I think, I don't think there's any argument about this, is one of the most qualified communications professionals in the world. And I remember having conversations with my father about the fact that the church was pursuing him for this role for many years, and that Aaron had turned it down for a variety of reasons. And I think eventually decided that he sort of felt a responsibility, an obligation. Obligation is kind of a strong word, because I think he appreciates the role he's been given and takes it seriously. But this was not something he pursued. It was not something that he was interested in, taking whatever pay cut which he has taken in order to take this job. It was something that the brethren very much wanted him to do. And so he felt, as a good Latter-day Saint, that perhaps that was something he ought to respond to. So, Jacob, the reason I called you an anti-church activist, and I think, to be fair, your followers are certainly more aggressive in that regard than you have been. There's one guy that I've been crossing swords with who has a petition online that says fire Aaron Sherinian, and sign this petition to make sure you fire Aaron Sherinian. And the reason I wanted to talk to you and the reason I wanted to discuss this is that I don't think you recognize the damage that you're doing to Aaron Sherinian personally as a human being. And I don't think you recognize the damage you are doing to the reputation of the church. Because when you attack Aaron Sherinian, I mean, you're welcome. And this is the thing.
And I guess there's sort of a presupposition in all of this that I'm attacking Aaron Sherinian. And I want to just say to everyone right now, right off the bat, the only thing that I said online that specifically about Aaron Sherinian was that elevating him to that position because of certain things that he said in the past it can create some confusion because of obviously some of his stances that he's had very publicly about gay marriage and about pride and attending pride parades. But I've never called for Aaron Sherinian to be fired so far as I know. I would disagree with anyone who's putting out a petition to get him fired. The brethren ultimately can make that decision of if he's there. My issue I don't have anything personal against Aaron Sherinian. I think that Aaron, all the things you say about him, I don't assume they're not true. I don't know the man. Ultimately, the church and the brethren have felt that whatever the controversies are about past things that he has said is worth it to them. They still want to have him in that position. So I just want to clarify that I'm not out here in opposition specifically to Aaron Sherinian in any way, except in this, I have concerns about some of the optics around things that Aaron has said in the past and the way that those might contribute to confusion and division in the church. And I think that there are people that are bringing up concerns about Aaron's beliefs around issues related to the family proclamation. And I think that there's legitimate questions. I also think that there are terrible actors online. I agree with you 100%. My followers per se, let me just say, if you are a follower of mine and you are acting inappropriately online and saying terrible things about him on a personal level or any of that kind of stuff, I'll condemn that openly right now, 100%. That is unacceptable. There's no need for incivility. On the other hand, I do think that there's an issue underlying all of this that I think is really what I kind of want to talk about today. I'm perfectly fine, Jim, here publicly supporting Aaron, right? But what I also want to do is say, there's a reason this whole controversy exists. And I think that is the more fundamental issue, that unless we address it, this sort of thing is going to continue to happen, and we're going to continue to have division in the church. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I don't dispute anything that you've just said. Where I think you have a blind spot is in your estimation that this sort of just asking questions approach doesn't constitute activism against the church. I mean, this is the way that Kate Kelly framed the whole ordained women movement. She talked about all the questions she was asking. Look, we're just asking questions. We just want to discuss this. We just want to talk about this. And church leaders very much interpreted that as her essentially, even if I mean, I think she finally reached a point where she was making demands, but even that whole framework of, well, gosh, this is causing division, acts as if you're living in some sort of vacuum where the division isn't being driven by you, Jacob Hansen, trying to bring these questions out into the conversation in a way that I don't think the church finds particularly helpful. The thing that I don't think you guys realize is that the brethren who hired Aaron Sherinian, who pursued Aaron Sherinian to put him in this role, are 100% on Team Sherinian. So when you start saying, well, I question Aaron Sherinian and I question his faith and I question his commitment to the family proclamation.
Have I ever said that I question his faith? Or that I'm opposed to the brethren?
This is what I'm trying to illustrate, is that, first of all, I mean, the distinction between questioning his commitment to the family proclamation and questioning his faith seems to me to be a distinction without a difference.
Well, I mean, and I think this is getting more into the roots of some of this. I wanted to share, if I could just have a minute, what I wanted to do was show something that I think highlights the confusion that I think that exists around this issue. Okay, because we sort of have what the brethren have said, and then we have things you say, well, why would you question his commitment to the family proclamation?
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. It's not why would you question his commitment to the family proclamation. It's why don't you trust the brethren in terms of their willingness to accept that Aaron Sherinian supports the fundamental doctrines of the church, including the family proclamation. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't put him in that position. So as you sit here and say, well, I'm questioning his commitment to this, what you're saying is, I don't trust the brethren and I don't sustain the brethren in their decision to put Aaron Sherinian in this position. That's why I've called you an anti-church activist, because there's no difference between that lack of trust in the brethren's decision here than Kate Kelly's lack of trust in the brethren to not ordain women. The fact that you feel like you're doing this in the service of the church, that you're doing this in defense of the church, in defense of the family proclamation, I think creates that blind spot where you don't realize that what you're doing is questioning and doubting and refusing to sustain the brethren in their decision to put Aaron Sherinian in that position and keep him in that position. If Aaron Sherinian were ever to publicly do anything contrary to any doctrine of the church, including the family proclamation, he would be removed from that position within seconds. And the fact that he has remained in that position for years now demonstrates that the brethren have confidence in him. So as you sit here and say, I'm more than willing to talk about the confusion that you're feeling, or the confusion that you think is in the church, and that's fine. I just don't want anybody to be under any illusion as to where the brethren are with regard to Aaron Sherinian. And I don't want anybody to think that, oh, well, geez, I'm just asking questions, and there's really nothing wrong with just asking questions.
No,
when in fact those questions demonstrate a lack of confidence in the brethren in this instance.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't lack any confidence in the brethren's decision to make the decisions that they're going to make. Now, I have questions about why they made certain decisions that they made and what that means in relation to the church's position on the family proclamation, right? Obviously, I think a lot of this comes down to, and I'll share something on the screen here. A lot of members not too long ago were being told by the church that they were to support with their time, efforts, and means Proposition 8 in California, okay? And so when you're being told by the church to support Proposition 8 and that you are to, and a lot of people lost friendships and all sorts of things over this. And then here, just, a few years after this, you have Aaron Sherinian, while I believe he's a bishop at this time, posting these sorts of things on social media. That love is love and marriage equality, and he's so proud of their pride in these kids. And now here's my thing, okay? That's fine. But you can't say that it's an illegitimate question, or that my confusion or the confusion of other members somehow illegitimate here when we're trying to understand what this all means. Does this mean that the church now has altered its thoughts on gay marriage, or on like what do you think this means, Jim? Or has Aaron Sherinian changed his position on this? Does he now sort of renounce these sorts of things that he said in the past? And I'm fine with that. Like, either way, this isn't about Aaron ultimately. I'm confused here, and a lot of us are confused, and we're trying to understand. And when you're saying, well, you can't ask questions because if you ask questions, that implies that you don't support the brethren. Well, then what am I supposed to do, Jim, if I'm genuinely confused?
Well, see, again, you're missing the forest for the trees here for a number of different reasons. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you've just said. But again, my purpose for being here and my purpose for talking about this is to demonstrate that the fact that you feel confusion and that you have questions, you think justifies the kind of public criticism that you're engaging in of the brethren.
Hold on here. You're saying that I'm making public criticism. Yes. I want to understand what specifically I said.
So that's why I'm answering your question. So let me complete the sentences before you jump in and try to. Anyway, now I've lost my train of thought.
Well, go ahead.
So this is, again, my purpose for being here, is that there are a number of issues in the church, even independent of LGBTQ issues, where people feel disagreement or confusion with the brethren, and the church has made it very clear that the kinds of ways we deal with that kind of confusion or those kinds of disagreements in the church is different from the way that we do it in secular society. You know, when we're engaged in political discussions, people very often express their concerns in very vigorous and angry and uncivil ways, but they also engage in peaceful protest. They engage in passionate advocacy, and we're told that's an entirely appropriate thing to do in secular settings. We've been told repeatedly and recently that those same kind of approaches are not appropriate for people who have made covenants to sustain their leaders.
And Jim, I'm wondering. There's an implication here, though.
I've got to finish my thought, Jacob, before you jump in.
Okay.
I really have to finish my thought. I don't think I'm taking too much time. If I go on for way too long, Stephen, feel free to tell me to shut up.
Okay.
But so my point here is that the difficulty. I do not have any issue, Jacob, with the fact that you find this confusing, that you find this troubling, that you may disagree with Aaron Sherinian, that you may think Aaron Sherinian is not an appropriate person to be carrying the flag for the brethren who have hired him. But I don't think that there is any confusion over the fact that the way you are going about raising those questions, dealing with those questions, is following the kind of secular model that is essentially a sort of peaceful protest or a peace. I mean, this is not. This is absolutely a demonstration of the fact that you do not have confidence that the people who have put him in that position are aware of Aaron Sherinian's positions, or are untroubled by them, or are troubled by them. I mean, the reality is, the brethren are. This may be a tangent, so I'll let that go.
Could I ask though again to clarify what I'm sitting here just wondering. I'm hearing all these things, that I'm engaging in this activism and things, and I'm genuinely wondering, like, what have I done specifically? I think I'm getting like lumped into something here. What have I done specifically that is like, I just want a specific thing. Like, what specific thing have I said or done?
Well, about 2 minutes ago, you showed pictures of Aaron Sherinian saying this is contrary to the teachings of the church. The church has asked people to sacrifice in support of these. Aaron Sherinian is clearly in objection to these. So Aaron Sherinian very clearly is contrary to the teachings of the church. Now, I mean, I don't know how to make it any clearer than to say that I think you don't seem to recognize that this isn't just how Jim Bennett sees this.
No,
this is very much how the church sees this. The church looks at what you're doing and does not appreciate what you're doing. They do not appreciate the fact that you do not have enough confidence in them to recognize that it's okay for Aaron Sherinian to be in that role, because they have chosen Aaron Sherinian to be in that role. And when you start saying this, well, golly, I have so many questions and all of this, and what am I doing? I'm just asking questions. This is the way activists function in the church, and you don't get a pass for the fact that your activism is being done in support of church doctrine rather than contrary to church doctrine. The reality is you are saying to the world that you are not comfortable with what the church is doing, and many people are looking at what you do here and saying, gosh, I got to jump into the fray. And the fact that you've said, okay, well, please don't have petitions and please don't do all of this, doesn't mitigate the fact that the way you are conducting this demonstrates a lack of confidence in the brethren and in their decision to hire Aaron.
I would say that I wouldn't say that it's a lack of confidence as much as it is that I just don't understand some of the things that are going on, and I think it's contributing to confusion. And I think I'm entitled to say to point that out, that this is leaving a lot of people confused. I mean, do you think it means anything that they hired him knowing all of this? Like, let's say that Aaron Sherinian still holds those positions, the brethren are fully aware of it. Like, what does that say about the brethren and their position on gay marriage, for example? Like, does belief matter in that when it comes to, high up leaders in the church? Like, is the church changing or evolving in this area?
Well, we've had that discussion before, Jacob. I mean, we've talked about the fact that the church has changed quite a bit on this issue. The church in my lifetime has moved from the idea that gay people are voluntary perverts who choose to be gay, mm-hmm. and that if they're sufficiently righteous, they will no longer be gay. We no longer teach that. We no longer teach that people choose the attractions that they have. We no longer teach that sufficient righteousness will change those attractions.
I see.
When you start saying this, what you're saying is, again, that the brethren are not doing this the right way. The brethren are the ones who have hired Aaron Sherinian, and therefore you interpret that as some kind of signal, and you're not comfortable with that signal, and you're demanding that the brethren better explain themselves and better justify their hiring decisions to Jacob Hansen.
I would say that I'm trying to understand if the church's position is changing on key fundamental issues. I want to show something real quick that I think makes this point, because there are people out there that are watching this and are thinking to themselves, hey, is this a signal of something big that's changing in the church? Like, is the church moving in a new direction? Okay. And so I actually had a conversation with Kwaku and on Ward Radio, and it was funny because Kwaku is sort of like, yeah, obviously, like, Aaron Sherinian's hiring means something. And I just want to show real quick what he said, because I think it's very, very kind of telling and important.
And
let Kwaku finish.
Is gay marriage on the table for the future?
Okay, now hold on a second.
If this is where the church wants to go, it is a genuine question. I proposed a question on Twitter. People got mad at me for asking, but it's very relevant to what's happening today. If this is the future, and this is the direction the church has said, hey, in 20 years we're going to be a church that allows gay marriage, this is the person you'd hire.
So if I understand you correctly,
we haven't made a choice.
As a professional event coordinator that's done a really good job making huge parties happen and so on and so forth with thousands of people. You understand that there's a runway of advertising that has to get done for the big event. And you're saying you sense the road getting paved for a major announcement, if they were going to make a major announcement on a change on a view that's a little bit more secular on gay marriage, that this is the move to take.
I'm not coping here, guys. I'm just saying I see what's there. And I'm just saying it walks like a duck, talks like a duck. It's probably a duck.
So what I see is these sorts of conversations happening, especially amongst young Latter-day Saints. Now, I'm not saying that, the brethren can make the decision that they want, okay? But ultimately, if I'm wondering, again, and not to talk about Aaron Sherinian, is there a change coming in the church? And is this a signal that things are indeed changing? And if they are changing, what does this mean about our current doctrines that are taught by the brethren? Right now, the church holds two very specific doctrines that it's held all the way through its history and they're canonized in our scripture. Number one is that marriage is a requirement for exaltation. And number two is that marriage is defined as the union between a man and a woman. Okay? Now, Jim, if you do you believe those to be true, or do you think that they may be false and may change in the future, those two truths?
We've had that discussion before, Jacob. I mean, so you're asking me this, I think, in a sort of performative way to try to get me to say something that you can use in a debate against me. And I'm not really interested in doing
No,
that.
I'm trying to get to the fundamental issue here, okay?
No,
because Jim, I'm trying to understand this. The church makes truth claims about sexuality. The reason that we have the doctrines that we do are because we believe that marriage is a requirement for exaltation, and that marriage, what we mean by that term, is the union of a man and a woman, okay? If you say that that can change, you're saying that those truth claims are not true, because if they were true, then they wouldn't change. And my question is, and everyone is asking this is the heart of
Everyone
the division. Yes, I think this is the big question everyone is asking. Is the church going to change its position on marriage and on sexuality? And if it is, then that means that the truth claims that the church is currently making explicitly on this subject are not actually true. And so I support the brethren because it is the brethren who have said that this is not going to change. And so I'm sitting here going, if this is not going to change, there are others out there who are saying that it could change. In other words, what they're saying is that the claim that marriage is the union of a man and a woman as defined by God is not actually true. And that, in my mind, is a much more serious issue of activism against the doctrines taught by the church than me having mere questions about was it the person, is this helping the division and confusion? And leave it to the brethren, they can make that decision. But what I'm saying is something more fundamental. I'm trying to figure out if the church is moving in that direction and if this doctrine can change. And in my opinion, I believe the brethren when they say, no, it can't change. And I think we have a problem because a lot of people are doubting them when they say that.
But if it does change, you will no longer support the brethren. Is that correct?
My thing is that it won't change because it's true.
Then why are we having this conversation? If it's not going to change.
Because there are those out there like Kwaku and others
who is terrified that it might change, terrified that this is a signal that it could change.
I know I'm not terrified that it will change. What I'm afraid of is the fact that it's not going to change, but that when people are out there causing people to think that our current doctrines are not true because they will change, If the doctrine changes, if the claim that is made by the church right now that marriage is defined by God is between a man and a woman, if that changes, that means the original claim was not true.
Steve,
Okay,
you look
just
like you want to
real
say
quick,
something.
I want to jump in here because I think it's really important because as an outsider, Mormonism fundamentally changed the definition of marriage. I'm speaking just outside secular anthropologists when they introduced the concept of polygamy. All right, and then they said that this is an eternal principle, and even John Taylor says this as a revelation.
I would dispute that, Stephen.
Okay, well,
I don't believe that there's every plural marriage is an individual union between one man and one woman. It's one man who has multiple marriages.
Okay, so
and it wasn't a redefinition of the term marriage. It was just plural marriages.
Okay, I'm saying it was a practice that was foreign to the Republic and to Western civilization. It was viewed as one of the twin relics of barbarism. That was the foundation of the Republican Party, was slavery and polygamy. So culturally, it was a counterculture movement that was happening at the time. Okay, and it was a redefinition. It was viewed from the outside as a redefinition of marriage in civil society. So you have that, and then the church changed their position and eventually started excommunicating people for practicing this principle. So there was a change to an eternal doctrine that people thought would fundamentally never change. Hold on.
Could I make a distinction?
Okay, sure.
So there's a distinction between a doctrine, a policy or practice, and culture. Okay.
Here we go.
The church's practices have changed, no doubt about it. The church's culture has changed, no doubt about it. The doctrines are the fundamental truth claims that are made that undergird the policies and practices of the church. So my point here is this. The change that we're talking about here is a redefinition of the meaning of the term marriage, something that the brethren have quite explicitly said will not change, and that those who try to will be accountable to God for it. Okay? So the reason why this is a big deal is because when you say that our definition of marriage can change, you are implying that our current definition of marriage is not true, that our current doctrine on marriage, because if it was true doctrine, it wouldn't need to change. And so my whole thing is every time that Jim and others go on and say this can change, what they're saying is they're implying that the brethren are wrong. And so when Jim comes to me and says that I'm engaging in activism in the church, without even providing anything specific that I've done that constitutes activism, except for to say that, hey, like this is causing confusion in the church over this issue. And
the church owes you answers, Jacob.
And what I'm pointing out is what I'm pointing out here is that when you say that these things can change, you are engaging in causing people to doubt the current doctrines of the church as true. As true.
Okay, so just real quick, I just want to clarify because, of course, Jacob, in the past, you have said that Brigham Young was wrong about the one-drop rule about race. You're questioning, one of the most important people in your movement.
Oh no, I mean to say here's the thing, to say that the brethren have been wrong in the past about things. Yes, I don't make any qualm about that. The question is, are they wrong about marriage? Jim is implying that there's a chance that they are, and that's why he says that this can change. I'm the one saying no.
I haven't said this can change.
You've never held you. So you don't believe that that the doctrine of marriage can change,
Jacob. What I'm saying here right now is that you're missing the forest for the trees, because if the doctrine changes, the brethren will be the ones who change it. It won't change because Jim Bennett wants it to change or Steven Pynakker wants it to change. It will change if it changes, and I don't know if it will change. But if it changes, it will change because the brethren are the ones who are changing it.
You're right. The question is,
say that you are supporting the brethren by demanding that they do not change this doctrine, you are absolutely engaging in activism and telling the brethren what they can and can't do, and that you will not support them if they do something that goes contrary to your understanding of what the truth of the church is. The brethren are the ones who hold the priesthood keys, who have that authority, and if they choose to make decisions that change our doctrine on this, and I get so, I roll my eyes in the back of my head when we start making these distinctions between doctrine and policy and what can change and what can't change. This is a church built on modern revelation. This is a church that has, there's no such thing as false truth, but there is such a thing as false doctrine. Doctrine changes when we receive further light and knowledge that better aligns us with the fundamental truths that undergird them.
Yes, but
as you sit here and complain and worry and say, Jim, you're an activist when you say this can change, that I have never, ever, 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 ever said that this will change. I have said I hope for further light and knowledge, but I trust the brethren. And if this never changes in my lifetime, I will die a faithful, active member of the church.
And that's good. If you trust the brethren, I want to play what the brethren have said on this subject to answer the question of if it will change. You say that it can change, it may change.
You can go ahead. You can go ahead and play that, Jacob. But the fact of the matter is, I've got no problem with that. I have heard this.
That's fine. I think it would be good for people to see what the brethren have said on this.
Okay.
False prophets and false teachers are those who attempt to change the God-given and scripturally based doctrines that protect the sanctity of marriage, the divine nature of the family, and the essential doctrine of personal morality. They advocate a redefinition of morality to justify fornication, adultery, and homosexual relationships. Some openly champion the legalization of so-called same-gender marriages. To justify their rejection of God's immutable laws that protect the family, these false prophets and false teachers even attack the inspired proclamation on the family issued to the world in 1995 by the First Presidency and the 12 Apostles.
Those who do not fully understand the Father's loving plan for his children may consider this family proclamation no more than a changeable statement of policy. In contrast, we affirm that the family proclamation, founded on unchangeable doctrine, defines the kind of family relationships where the most important part of our eternal development can occur. Fundamental to us is God's revelation that exaltation can only be attained through faithfulness to the covenants of an eternal marriage between a man and a woman. That divine doctrine is why we teach that gender is an essential characteristic of individual, premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose.
Thus, Satan seeks to confuse us about our stewardships and distinctive natures as men and women. He bombards us with bizarre messages about gender, marriage, family, and all male-female relationships.
But our claims for the role of marriage and family rest not on social science, but on the truth that they are God's creation. It is He who in the beginning created Adam and Eve in His image, male and female, and joined them as husband and wife to become one flesh and to multiply and replenish the earth. Each individual carries the divine image, but it is in the matrimonial union of male and female as one that we attain perhaps the most complete meaning of our having been made in the image of God, male and female. Nor we nor any other mortal can alter this divine order of matrimony. It is not a human invention.
God-sanctioned marriage between a man and a woman has been the basis of civilization for thousands of years. There is no justification to redefine what marriage is. Such is not our right, and those who try will find themselves answerable to God.
Marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God, and the family is central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of His children.
In large measure, true manhood is defined in our relationship to women. The First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles have given us the ideal to pursue in these words: the family is ordained of God. Marriage between man and woman is essential to His eternal plan. Children are entitled to birth within the bonds of matrimony and to be reared by a father and a mother who honor marital vows with complete fidelity.
Worldly trends to define marriage in some other way would sadly serve to destroy the institution of marriage. Such schemes are contrary to the plan of God.
The church must retain its family-based orientation. Among the first instructions given to man and woman was, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." God in His divine plan ordained marriage to bring about His basic organizational unit, the family.
Regardless of what civil legislation may be enacted, the doctrine of the Lord regarding marriage and morality cannot be changed. Remember, sin, even if legalized by man, is still sin in the eyes of God. We also know that gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. Marriage between a man and a woman is fundamental to the Lord's doctrine and crucial to God's eternal plan. God's marriage pattern cannot be abused, misunderstood, or misconstrued. Oh, we are to emulate our Savior's kindness and compassion, while we are to value the rights and feelings of all of God's children. We cannot change His doctrine. It is not ours to change. His doctrine is ours to study, understand, and uphold.
So when I hear those words and then I hear people talking about this changing, in my mind, it's like saying that, well, maybe the church will change its position on Jesus rising from the dead. It's like, no, it won't, because that's true. Jesus did rise from the dead. And when you call into question, when you say that this could change, that marriage may not be defined as between a man and a woman, you're calling into question everything the brethren have taught since the beginning. And not only that, the scriptures and the entire Christian tradition. My whole point is just that a lot of people think this is going to change, or they think it could change. And I'm here saying that when you imply that, you're implying that what the brethren currently teach is not true. And that, in my mind, is a major issue that's causing a division in the church. So when it comes to the Arian Sharinian situation, I am perfectly willing to concede, look, the brethren can make the call that they want, all that kind of stuff. But when anyone in the church engages in the idea that these things that we just listened to are not true, it causes confusion to me, and it causes division within the church. And that, I think, is something that is very real right now. And that if we just say, well, we can't talk about it, like, no, we should talk about it. And we should talk about why this can't change. Like, why do you think President Nelson said that this can't change?
Jacob, every single person in that video, with the exception of Gordon B. Hinckley, has signed off on Aaron Sharinian being in the position that
I know, and I'm fine with that.
No, you're not.
Why are you, Jim? You are acting like no. This isn't fair. This isn't fair, Jim. Because you're acting like you're acting like I have a position that I don't have. My position is that the brethren are perfectly fine to make the call that they have. I'm pointing out that this is causing some confusion, and maybe that confusion is justified because Aaron is good enough at his job and all that kind of stuff that they do it. And I'm fine with that. The brethren can make that call. I'm trying to point out, though, that there's an underlying issue that needs to be addressed by all of us. We need to have a conversation of if we really believe President Nelson when he says that this doctrine will not change. Because I'm surrounded by people like Kwaku El, like Cardin, and others who are looking at this and going, maybe President Nelson is wrong when he says that this doctrine won't change.
If the doctrine changes, it will because President Nelson or his successors change it. If
They've said it won't. Why would you imply that they would?
Please, Jacob. I'm not asking for too much. Please just let me make a point before you jump in and cut me off. Please. If the doctrine changes, it will be because President Nelson or his successors change it. If you are that confident that it will not change, then you don't seem to realize that raising this issue, showing me that video as if I've never seen any of that, as if I'm not aware of any of that, as if I'm not fully cognizant of what it is that my church teaches and the leaders that I sustain teach, is just kind of silly because I don't have any influence as to whether or not this doctrine will change.
But you're implying that it could.
I could engage in activism to try to change it, but I choose not to do that. I choose to trust the brethren, and if the doctrine never changes, if the teachings never change, if anything never changes, I will continue to sustain the leaders of the church as I have done in the past and as I will do for the rest of my life. So when you're showing that video, and you're trying to sort of convince me of something that I am fully aware of, you don't seem to recognize that the person you're trying to convince, or the two people you're trying to convince, are the prophet and yourself. Because if the first presidency and the Quorum of the 12 really did hire Aaron Sherinian, I don't believe this is the case, but if they really did hire Aaron Sherinian as sort of this coded message that there's change on the horizon and that we're going to abandon the doctrines that you love, then everything you're doing now isn't going to stop that, isn't going to change that. As you sit there and say, gosh, well, look, this is the message that it's sending, what you are saying is, hey, President Nelson, you are sending the wrong message. I want you to stop sending this message. I want the church to answer to me and to be able to conduct itself in a way that I find acceptable. And so as you do that, and you play all of these things that the brethren have said, and sort of pretend that you are sustaining the brethren that you are questioning and whose authority you are calling into question, that's exactly what these questions that you are raising are doing. When you talk about this confusion, you talk about this is happening in some kind of vacuum, and not the fact that the confusion is being stirred and being provoked by what Jacob Hansen is doing all day, every day, and that you are not an active participant in causing the confusion. I think that needs to be called out. This is the reason I am here, Jacob. I am not here to try to get the church to change on gay marriage. I don't want the church to change on gay marriage if God doesn't want the church to change on gay marriage. And you and I are both in agreement that what God wants on marriage is what should happen. And if that means that nothing ever changes, I am 100% okay with that. I am here because you and others like you do not recognize that when you stir up this confusion, this is not appreciated by the church, which is 100% on trained Sherinian. Well, they're 100% behind Aaron Sherinian. And if you think that that's a problem of the message that they're sending, then you are criticizing the leaders who are sending that message. I think that is a very clear and concise and easy thing for people to wrap their brains around. So if you want to start diving into trying to convince me that this doctrine will never change, when it doesn't matter that to me whether or not this changes, and I'm not trying to in any way encourage the church to change, and I don't believe this doctrine can change unless God reveals something specific to make it change, and I think we are in agreement on that. I think there is a difference in that if it were to change, I would still be an active member of the church, and you've made many statements to the contrary. At some point, times you said you would leave the church, and other times you'd say, I would not sustain the brethren. But then you insist that that's okay because it's not going to change. And I just sit there and I listen to people saying this will never, ever, 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 ever change. And I just think, who are you trying to convince? Who are you trying to convince?
Well, I would say people like Kwaku. People like Cardin.
What does it matter if Kwaku thinks it's going to change? Then he's wrong.
Because
then he's wrong. So what?
If
everybody's wrong about a lot of things, what people personally believe, I've said this many times, the amount of latitude that members of the church have to believe different and even heretical things is much broader than people realize. But the flip side to that is the amount of latitude church members have to criticize church leaders is much narrower than people realize. Church leaders do not appreciate and do not tolerate people who try to correct them, people who try to tell them they're doing something wrong, people who try to second guess them. And those are all things that the discussion you are driving are doing. Whereas if members of the church want to believe that the Holy Ghost is Heavenly Mother, or they want to believe that there is no polygamy in heaven, or that there is massive polygamy in heaven, or that whatever pet doctrine you want to believe, members of the church are entirely welcome and within their purview to believe wrong, stupid things. Where they get into trouble, and where I think you are in more trouble than you realize, or you are causing more damage than you realize, is when you start to say, hey, brethren, you're not teaching this the right way. You're the ones creating.
I've never said
You've
that.
done
Again,
things that I think you need to stop doing.
This entire conversation, one of the things that's been going on over and over is that you're making these accusations against me as though I am somehow engaging in activism against the brethren, when all I'm doing is pointing out that this message is confusion, that this is causing confusion amongst the members, okay? And it is causing confusion amongst the members, as I showed you with Kwaku and others. That is a very common sentiment, that what this all is that it signals that something is changing. And I don't believe that it's changing, and I'm not criticizing the brethren over this. I'm just expressing that I'm confused and many other people are confused, and what we want is some clarity on this issue, because the lack of clarity...
You want the brethren to answer to you.
No, I want us as members to talk about this, to understand why does President Nelson say this won't change? Why do we have the doctrines that we do on sexuality? Why am I so confident that it won't change? I'm very, very confident the church will never...
that it won't change.
What was that?
You don't seem at all confident that it won't change.
No, I am, and that's why this is why I'm so active, is because I know it won't change, and when I see people implying that it will, that is when I say, you, the people that do that, are engaging in a sort of undermining of the church's current doctrines, because you say that they might not be true. And people don't recognize that that's what they're doing. And what I'm trying to do is say, no, we need to sustain the doctrines that are taught by the brethren. And when President Nelson says that this doctrine will not change, we need to believe him. It is you and others who imply that maybe President Nelson is wrong about this. And then you turn around and lecture me as though I'm the one who is pointing this out. I'm the one causing the problem. And yet you can't point to anything specific that I've even done where I've ever gone out on this issue or with Aaron Sherinian and said that the brethren are wrong. All I have said is that this sort of messaging from people like Sherinian in the past, you know, people are like, well, that's odd. And it is not unfair. We are not activists for pointing out the fact that we're confused. And we hear people around us saying, the reality is this, Jim, I would say somewhere around 30% to maybe 50% amongst younger members believe that President Nelson is wrong when he says that this will never change. They think that it is possible that it will. And that's a major issue. And I think it needs to be addressed amongst my generation to say, no, when the brethren say this isn't going to change, we need to believe them and stop spreading false ideas and have a deeper conversation about why it won't change so that we can become unified as a church around these doctrines.
Do you think the brethren appreciate how you have approached Aaron Sherinian's hiring and how you've approached Aaron Sherinian's answer to his question at FAIR?
I have no idea what I have done that would have made them angry.
Do you think they appreciate it?
What appreciate what? What have I said?
It's a very simple question. I mean, you said quite a few things. I mean, whether or not.
Well, what one? I'm genuinely this whole time. My number one thing that I had in all of this, when you accuse me of being an anti-church activist, is I'm sitting there going, "What did I say?"
Well,
you've provided no specifics. This is one of the things that's happened in this. You're right. You said you're not going to?
Well, in terms of what I'm about to say to you, I can say with 100% confidence that the brethren do not appreciate how you have conducted yourself with regard to this issue.
Okay.
With regard to the hiring of Aaron Sherinian, with regard to his answer at FAIR. They do not appreciate the questions you're asking. They do not appreciate the discussion that you're curating. They do not appreciate the kind of sentiment that has, I mean, and
what
and
specifically though? What discussion was I curating? What
you don't answer? You don't answer to me. I have no stewardship over you, Jacob.
Jim, my point is that you've made accusations against me publicly, and I'm trying to understand what I did specifically.
What I am saying is that I have absolute full confidence that it's not just Jim Bennett who sees what you're doing as activism against the church.
Well, so I'm asking you, Jim Bennett, why do you, like, what specifically have I done that is activism against the church?
I've answered that question. I think everything you've been doing in this entire discussion, I think the brethren would see it as activism against the church. Because as you sit here and say, you know, everybody needs to know this absolutely can't change, you don't seem to recognize that the only people who can change this are the brethren who you are accusing of sending mixed signals on this subject.
Well, they literally just said in that video that it won't change and that we need to
great.
know that
and
it won't change. And that those who try to change it are acting against God. Is that true? Are they telling the truth when they say that?
I absolutely think they're telling the truth.
Well, then why are we even implying that this could change in any way?
Because you're implying that the signal that they're sending with the hiring of Aaron Sherinian is a signal that it will change.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are people
absolutely saying that.
No, I'm pointing out that people like Kwaku and others do feel that this is a signal.
But come on, Jacob. You're the one driving the discussion. You're the one stirring the pot.
I'm the one replying to those who are out there saying that this is a
You're
signal that things will change.
You're the one demanding that the church clarify things to you and to your satisfaction.
No, I am not. I've never said that. I'm demanding that we as members have a conversation about why this doctrine will not change, so that way people stop implying that it will. There are books on the shelf at Deseret Book right now by people like Richard Ostler that has an entire chapter about why we should be open to this doctrine changing.
Oh, it's just the policing of other people's faith is just such a waste of time.
Jim, it isn't the policing of other people's faith. It's the policing of doubt and the spreading of doubt, in the words of President Nelson. I'm sitting here literally trying to get people to believe President Nelson's words.
I believe and sustain President Nelson when he believes that Aaron Sherinian is the right person to be the communications.
So do I.
Well, if you do, then sustain the decision and stop stirring the pot. That's why I'm here.
I'm not stirring the pot, Jim. I'm pointing out that there is a deeper issue here. Aaron Sherinian is not the subject of, like, I don't care that much about Aaron Sherinian. I care about the underlying division in the church.
You obviously don't care about Aaron Sherinian because you have no idea the amount of damage you've done to him personally with the kind of things that you've been doing.
Jim, I don't know Aaron Sherinian from Adam.
You're right, you don't.
And I'm not commenting on Aaron Sherinian. I'm commenting on the fact that right now we have a deep division in the church. And that division centers between those who believe President Nelson when he says this will not change, it cannot change, and those who don't. And for someone to turn around and tell me that I'm engaging in activism when I support the prophet, he's saying
you don't support the prophet's decision.
Yes, I do, Jim. I can say it till I'm blue in the face. I support the prophet's decision to hire Aaron Sherinian. That is his decision to make, and I support him being the one that makes that final judgment. You're trying to pin me at something that I'm not. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want the perspective here from you, Jim. Is let's say. Let's flip the script a little bit here, and let's say that there was a person that was hired by the church that was putting out
a little bit, Stephen. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. That was putting out Christian nationalist tweets, and was flying the flag that some would consider the flag of insurrection, and then gets hired by the church to do public relations. Would you question the brethren in that case? So I'm just trying to, maybe from your perspective, how would you respond to a Christian nationalist type kind of person getting a PR job with the church? How would you handle that?
I think it's a really interesting question because I've been asked similar questions as I jumped into this discussion. One guy asked the question, well, does this mean that if the church were to put in a known pedophile in that position, that you wouldn't criticize them? And I see inherent in the question a real lack of confidence in the brethren. The idea that the brethren would choose, the known pedophile is clearly a more extreme example, Stephen, than the one you've just provided. But I have full confidence that the brethren are not about to put somebody in that kind of a position that holds views that are so problematic and so contrary to the teachings of the church. And so I mean, it's a hypothetical. I think if the church were to start doing that and were to start appointing people with reprehensible and loathsome views, somebody else said, what would you do if a church leader was using the N-word all the time? Wouldn't you criticize them for that? And my response has always been, I think the church would probably jump out in front of me and criticize them and fire them before I get a chance to do anything on that. I mean, the hypothetical on that requires me to have less trust in the brethren than I do. And so, and that kind of goes to all these things that Jacob is saying, where Jacob is like, well, I'm so nervous, I'm so upset that this is sending the signal that this could change, that's what this is, that's what this is being interpreted as. That shows a lack of confidence in the idea that if the brethren thought that Aaron Sherinian were perpetuating doctrines or perpetuating ideas that are contrary to the fundamental principles of the church, Aaron Sherinian would not be in that position. And I wanted to tell this story. I was going to tell this a little bit earlier, but this is probably an appropriate time to tell it. I interviewed for a position with the church. I was trying to be the director of governmental relations for the church. Bill Evans had announced his retirement, And he eventually didn't retire. I went very far in the interview process and came to the final interview, and then Bill Evans decided to stay in his job for another 3 years. So I did not get the job. But I had a lengthy conversation with Bill Evans, who was essentially the church's lobbyist, is the role. And he said, as the church's lobbyist, we function very different than other lobbyists. We don't go up to Capitol Hill in Salt Lake City and weigh in on every issue, because we know we have the biggest stick in the state. We know that people are loyal to the church, and we know that when we ask people to do something, that carries more weight than another lobbyist would have. So we have the biggest stick in the state, but we choose not to use it. At the same time, he said, when we do use it, when we do make these decisions, they go up, down, and sideways and are approved at every level, because we know that everything we say is going to be interpreted as the official position of the church. He said, so back in, I think it was 2008, there was a document called the Utah Compact that was essentially an endorsement, maybe it was a little later than that, but it was essentially an endorsement of the Obama administration's immigration policy, calling for a path to citizenship, calling to end deportations, calling for a very progressive stand on immigration. And Bill Evans signed a document on behalf of the church endorsing the Utah Compact. He did that on a Thursday, and that Saturday, the Utah Republican Convention, State Republican Convention, passed a resolution condemning the Utah Compact. And Bill Evans said, it was astonishing to me, and when people were asked and elected officials were asked, aren't you going against the church on this? They said, well, this wasn't the prophet. This was just the governmental relations department. This was just the lobbyists. This is just the political arm of the church. This wasn't the prophet. We sustain the prophet, but the immigration policy, And Bill Evans just says, does he think that I'm allowed to go rogue? Does he think that if I were to do that without the prophet's say so and prophet's approval, that I wouldn't be out on the street in seconds? I mean, we saw a similar thing happen when the whole, what's his face? Ballard, Tim Ballard thing, when the church issued a statement on Tim Ballard. And everybody was like, well, this wasn't the prophet. This was just the PR department. And I've worked for the Deseret News, and I remember when Hal Boyd, who was my boss when I worked for the Deseret News, published the church's statement, and everybody said, well, this is just the Deseret News. And it was like, do you really think that Hal Boyd wouldn't be, thrown out, run out of town on a rail if he were to publish something that was not from the church and saying it was from the church? So the idea that the brethren do not intimately know everything about Aaron Sherinian, probably far more than any of us do, that the brethren do not fully support Aaron Sherinian and support that decision and support keeping him in that position. If you're concerned, but the brethren have to tell me why this isn't a signal that things are changing. If this is a signal that things are changing, I don't think that it is. I've never said that it is. But if that's how people are interpreting that, you don't think the brethren are aware that that's how people are interpreting that? Do you think they need Jacob Hansen to go all over the internet and tell them, hey, what you're doing is creating this confusion? Because they're the ones, Jacob, who are creating the confusion. They're the ones you have a problem with.
No, look, if they think I'm just pointing to.
Your problem is with the idea that Aaron Sherinian's hiring is being interpreted as a signal, and that the brethren need to somehow be made aware of that, or that needs to be called to their attention.
I'm not calling anything to the attention of anyone except for I'm calling it to the attention of the general discussion between members online. I'm not petitioning the brethren. I'm not doing any of that. They can make the decisions that they make. And in this case, I'm just pointing out that what is actually happening to a lot of us to hopefully have a more fundamental conversation, which is what I want to have with you, Jim, about why we should believe President Nelson when he says that things that won't change, and why people like Kwaku, who are, and I'm using him as an example, there's tons of people like this that do think that this is a signal that something is changing. And I want people to know that that's not the case. And I would like to have Jim Bennett be on my side saying, yes, guys, this is not a signal that things are going to change. I, too, believe President Nelson, Jim Bennett, I, as Jim Bennett, believe President Nelson when he says that this will not change. And the thing is that...
So you want me to pass your purity test, that whatever it is that I believe, even if I don't ever state it, even if I don't ever try to do anything, you are concerned that whatever's going on in my head is... I need to believe and think things the way you do.
I believe that you should sustain President Nelson and believe him when he says the doctrine will not change, and stop implying on your podcast and in other places that this can change when President Nelson has explicitly said otherwise, and basically every other prophet that we've had ever since. And so the people that are fermenting the confusion are the people that are fomenting the message that this can change, and that Aaron Sherinian's hiring is a signal of that change. That is what I'm trying to address. And to say that I'm somehow pushing back against the Brethren's decision, no, I'm pushing against those who are saying out there publicly that Aaron Sherinian's hiring is a signal that things are going to change.
The vast majority of the people who are saying that Aaron Sherinian's hiring is a signal that things will change are people in your camp, Jacob. They're people who bring up those old social media posts over and over again and talk about, they're people who are coming from a place of abject fear and
I'm
terror.
not those people. I can only answer for I am only answering for myself. And I've explained very clearly, Jim. The people I am addressing are those who think that this is a signal that there's going to be a change. And I am the one, when I make the posts that I make, and pointing out that, hey, all of us need to know that when we send mixed signals, any of us, including you, Jim.
Who? Because
any of us. In your podcast, Jim, in your podcast, you multiple times have talked about the possibility of changes in the church around this doctrine. When you do that, you are undermining President Nelson when he says that this doctrine will not change. I don't believe the doctrine is going to change at all. But I believe that it's harmful when people imply that it will.
Jacob, to save time, I want to concede that I am the worst person in the world, and that I am. I don't want to spend 1 second trying to defend any of my heresies, which I'm sure are legion, or any of I don't care. If you think that I'm an abject apostate, or that I'm an activist against the church, or that I'm this, that, or the other, I don't give a rip. It doesn't make any difference to me, and I'm happy to concede that, and I'm happy to do whatever sort of abject groveling I can to say, yes, Jim Bennett is the worst. My point is a very simple one and a very narrow one, and that is that you cannot say that you're just asking questions and this is just, that you cannot claim to be sustaining the brethren as you continually call into question their judgment in hiring Aaron Sherinian here. And it's just so bizarre to me that you don't seem to own that. You seem to be acting like you're some sort of spectator on a discussion that you have essentially started and that you continue to foment.
I have not started this discussion. I have had the discussion about the division in the church, and I am very concerned about the way that people are interpreting the hiring of Aaron Sherinian. And I will say that the hiring of Aaron Sherinian just has, as a matter of simple fact, it has increased confusion around this, and I want people to be sure that they don't they don't take it too far and
brethren must have been
continue to
wrong there.
spread confusion on what the church's position is.
But you're the one spreading the confusion. This is the thing.
No, I'm not. I'm the one who's spreading the clarity that this is the
heretics-
doctrine of the church and it won't change.
The heretics and the unbelievers and the insufficiently ideologically pure have not looked at Aaron Sherinian's hiring or his answer at FAIR and said anything at all. They've been silent. Maybe they've been quietly happy. I don't know. But they haven't been up in arms and up in outrage, and they haven't been saying, oh, look, here comes change.
So what did John DeLynn think of this whole thing? John DeLynn was very
not
much
a member of the church.
I know, but you're saying the heretics and the people on the outside, the
John DeLynn
outsiders,
to sustain the leaders of the
outsiders.
church?
Jim, if you listen to the outsiders outside of the church, they all think that the church is just 20 years behind the time, and this is a signal that they'll eventually catch up. And there are many members in the church who believe
John
that.
DeLynn doesn't agree with you?
What was that?
You're expecting John DeLynn to sustain the leaders of the church?
No, what I'm saying is that I'm pointing out that even people on the outside of the church and people inside the church are interpreting this as that this is a signal that the church is going to change its doctrines. I am here to point out, A, that people are saying that people are interpreting it that way. And then number two is I'm pointing out that you shouldn't, because I actually trust the brethren when they say it's not going to change.
Okay, so
Jacob.
Okay, real quick, Jacob.
You don't trust.
Okay.
I mean, you don't seem to trust that it's not going to change. As you sit here and you it won't change. It won't change. It won't change. I don't know who it is you're trying to convince.
I'm trying to convince the many people in the church who listen to your podcast when you say that it can change.
Okay. I'm going to jump in here.
When you do that.
Jump in.
Go ahead.
I'm jumping in.
We're off the rails.
All right, Steven.
So, Jacob, let's just say that the brethren do not appreciate what you're doing. They look at you as being an activist along the lines of Kate Kelly or Sam Young. Also, let's just say, well, let's give you a real contemporary example. Recently, Michelle Brady Stone was asked to remove her YouTube channel because they viewed her as being an activist against the church, and she did. If your stake president and or bishop were to approach you and say, Jacob, we'd like for you to take down your channel or take down these videos that question the brethren regarding Aaron Sherinian, would you do so?
I'd have to think about that. I honestly, it's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical situation that honestly, it's like, would you believe the brethren if the brethren told you that Jesus didn't rise from the dead? It's like, no, I wouldn't, because my ultimate loyalty is to Christ and to the truth. And so when you tell me that the brethren would do something that contradicts Christ or the truth, that in my mind is, I wouldn't want to do that. So if they were to approach me and tell me to take down things I had said that were true, no, as a matter of integrity, I sustain the brethren. But if the brethren were to go contrary to Christ, I wouldn't sustain
the
them.
brethren as long as they don't ask you to do something you don't want to do.
No, if the brethren asked you, Jim, to deny Jesus Christ's resurrection, would you do it?
No.
Okay, good. So in other words, there are limits to which so you only will follow the brethren when they tell you to do things that you don't want or that you want to do. Like, no, we all have limits on what we would sustain. Jim, what did you think of the exclusion policy that the church came out with? Did you sustain the brethren in that?
Okay, Jacob, I don't have to pass your purity test.
No, Jim, I'm pointing out let me tell the audience. Jim was extremely against the exclusion policy. He almost left the church over it. You've said this explicitly yourself.
I've said
and
it many
so
times.
when you're coming to me saying that I need to sustain the brethren in all things, I have always done so. And you are the one who's here who literally was out advocating against the exclusion policy. And to this day, tell everyone that the brethren today were in error, including President Nelson, when he made that decision to sustain the exclusion policy. So my point is that we all have limits that we're up against. Aaron Sherinian's hiring isn't even close to being a major issue for me, except for the fact that we have a major division in the church, and I believe that what's going on is that many people in the church are taking his hiring to imply that, read the tea leaves on the wall, change is coming, the church is just 20 years behind, and eventually these things will change once the older apostles die out. That is the narrative that's out there. And I am trying to sustain the current brethren who have been explicit and clear. And so ultimately, I look at this and I say, how am I the one who's the activist against the church when I'm the one encouraging everyone to sustain President Nelson's declarations that these doctrines won't change?
That's a question you should be asking the brethren who are not pleased with how you have conducted yourself on this issue.
Jim, I don't know how you speak for the you speak for the brethren. You're hanging out with all of them. Like, I don't know why you're the one that we should believe is saying that.
You can believe me or not believe me, but it's really telling that when Stephen raises a hypothetical of what if your bishop came to you and said, take down the stuff you said about Aaron Sherinian, and you compare that to the brethren asking me what to deny the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
What have I said about Aaron Sherinian? This is the problem. These hypotheticals, you guys, I don't even know. Jim, you have not pointed to anything I've done specifically that's activism against the church. You just say that I've asked questions and pointed out issues and talked about the division, and it's as if that in and of itself is a problem. Like, I do podcasts where we talk about the issues facing Latter-day Saints.
Just to be really clear here, I asked you specifically, Jacob, that if they had asked you to take down videos where you're criticizing Aaron Sherinian, that you would have to think about that. That was a specific question about Aaron and the videos that you produced about them, that they go to you and they say,
Stephen, I don't know. What video did I produce about Aaron? What video did I produce about Aaron?
Jacob?
You showed the screenshots. The video where you show the screenshots of Aaron.
I simply asked the question in that video, with a whole bunch of other things, where I just said, hey, this is confusing to a lot of us, and I would want to understand why they would want to take it down. And if they provided,
that's fine, but that's I'm saying if your bishop or stake president specifically asked you to take down that video where you're just simply asking questions, would you do it?
I don't know. It would depend on their reasons behind it.
See,
okay, now
about that. I would have to seek revelation from the Lord on if I should or not. I don't believe in blind obedience to leaders. I believe in seeking the Spirit and doing that. So yeah, I would.
Okay, Jim. So I just want to propose the same scenario to you. Your bishop and stake president come to you and they say, "Listen, the brethren believe that what you're doing is activism against the church. We'd like for you to pull down your channel or pull down a specific video. We're requesting that you do that. Would you do it?"
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we clarify on that. Okay. Thank you very much. Now, this is a very sensitive and difficult topic, and so I want to try to and I want to bring the temperature down a little bit here too. But Jacob, what do you have to say about people who have been viewed as activists against the church in the past, who've been excommunicated, like John DeLynn, like Sam Young and others? Do you think that excommunication should be used in these cases? And what would happen if you were to be called in on something like this?
My ultimate loyalty is to Christ. Okay? My ultimate loyalty is to Christ. And so ultimately, if the I would just stay loyal to Christ, and ultimately if the brethren, but these sort of hypotheticals are sort of ridiculous because I believe that the brethren are aligned with Christ.
Okay, so just real quick, in the 1940s,
I'll put it this way: if I had to choose between Christ and the brethren, I would choose Christ. That's just the way it is.
Now, in the 1940s, the church put out a statement that said the priesthood ban was doctrine. Okay, so that's the doctrine that won't be changed. Very similar to the quotes that was given. Just a generation later, the church issues a statement saying that this was apparently now a policy, not a doctrine. It was redefined, and that they were lifting the priesthood ban. what would you have said to somebody in the 1940s who was questioning? It's the same. To me, it's the same thing that's going on today. I mean, it just shows that the church has actually changed doctrine, said something, redefined doctrine, and made changes with the society.
Certainly, because the church was in the wrong in the past. It was happening with this. It is false to say that sub-Saharan Africans inherit the curse of Cain. Okay, that's the doctrine that was held by the church that was false. Okay, if somebody wants to claim that the church's teaching that marriage is defined by God as between a man and a woman is false, they can do that. I don't think that that's the case. And so in the 1940s, if you were to have asked me, if I knew what I knew today, like, of course, I would say, of course it's false doctrine. It isn't true. And if you want to excommunicate me over that, then do it. Because ultimately, I will stay loyal to the truth over all things.
Okay,
and I'm sticking by the truth that God defined marriage as a man and a woman, and that is what the brethren currently teach.
Okay, but I'm just saying, is 1940s Jacob Hansen wouldn't have known what you know today. 1940s Jacob Hansen.
Yeah, so if then that's why I'm sort of having this conversation. What is it that I don't know that would convince me that the brethren are wrong about what the truth is about marriage and the way it's defined?
So this is the thing.
If GM or anyone wants to educate me on that as to why it would change, like what the reason would be behind that change, that would justify rejecting, or what would justify saying that it's what the church currently teaches is false, like, let me
Jacob,
know.
I have absolutely no problem with anything you have said about marriage between a man and a woman and the doctrine of the church, the marriage of women. And furthermore, I have no problem with you believing with all of your heart that this cannot and will not ever change. Zero problem whatsoever in that. I do not want to disabuse you of that notion. I don't want to try to convince you that it can change. It makes absolutely no difference to me what you believe on that.
But but remember, you aren't just talking to me, Jim. You are someone who has a public podcast that regularly implies that this doctrine can change.
Again, I am the worst person in the world.
Fine. And but here's what I'm saying, though, Jim.
I'm not trying to defend myself.
And I'm saying, then stop it. Then don't spread confusion by telling people that this can change, because when you say that it can change, what you are saying is that it might not be true. You're spreading doubt about the doctrine of marriage. And that is fomenting the confusion and division. At the heart of what I'm doing online in relation to this issue is I'm pushing back against those who are implying that this doctrine in the church can change, because it will hurt people's testimonies and it will drive people from the church. Because I have a convert, just a quick story. I have a guy who is very close to wanting to be a member of this church. The number one thing that is holding him back is that he hears voices like yours and others online talking about the potential for change around these doctrines, and he thinks that people are right, that the church will change its doctrine eventually. And so therefore, he's being kept from being baptized into the church because because people are implying that President Nelson may not be telling the truth when he says that the doctrine will not change.
Okay, so here's, again, where I just think you're missing the point. Again, I'm happy to concede, confess to all my wickedness. And if I am an activist against the church, and if I'm tearing the church down, there are priesthood channels that can take care of that. And I will have to suffer the consequences of whatever activism in which I am engaged. I don't think I'm engaged in any, but I don't care whether or not you agree with that. The only reason I wanted to have this discussion is because you still do not see the reality of the impact that you are having and the impact that you are having on the brethren. They are aware of your podcast, and I'm not speaking for them. But you keep acting as if you're having this sort of discussion and that the brethren are not paying attention to the discussion, that the brethren are not aware of whatever signals they may or may not be sending. And the whole underlying assumption driving everything that you are saying is a demonstration of a lack of confidence in their ability to send the signals they want to send and to sustain doctrines they want to sustain. It's absolutely the kind of arc steadying that is, there's no difference in terms of what you're doing to what Sam Young was doing when he was just asking questions about youth interviews, and what Kate Kelly was doing when she was just asking questions about ordaining women.
You will
on and on and on. The difference is that you want credit for defending the church as you attack the church. And the church,
what, Jim? Again, you are making accusation after accusation with nothing specific that I've done to attack the church. I haven't attacked the church. I'm not addressing my comments to the brethren. I'm addressing them to the general membership of the church who are confused on this issue. People like I showed before that are friends of mine who are saying over and over, hey guys, I think I see what's really going on here. And I'm saying, no, you guys shouldn't think that. That's
shouldn't think that.
Yes, they shouldn't think that the doctrine is going to change. They should not think that President Nelson is lying when he says the doctrine will not change.
I don't. So you continually accuse me of fomenting change, and I'm not really interested in defending myself on that.
I'm not even necessarily saying that you're fomenting change. I think what you're doing is you are implying that change is possible when President Nelson has explicitly said that it's not.
So you just used a word there, though, that was really interesting, because you're saying that I'm somehow, if I believe that change is coming or is even possible, that I think that means President Nelson is lying.
And no, I would say at least that he is wrong. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Well, there is a huge difference.
Okay, fine.
I don't think Brigham Young was lying when he said that black people bear the curse of Cain. He was not. A lie requires the intent to deceive.
You're right. He was wrong, and I don't think that you think that President Nelson is lying. I think you think that President Nelson.
I don't think President Nelson is lying.
Do you think he's mistaken?
I don't think I don't think he's mistaken.
Then why would you imply that the doctrine could change?
Because first of all, I don't concede that I imply the doctrine could change. What I concede is that
on your podcast, you never implied that the doctrine could change. In our last conversation, you implied as much.
I implied as much.
No, you said as much. You said it explicitly. The whole conversation was about how it could change.
Again, I'm not defending myself. I'm the worst. I probably said far worse things than that. But the thing is, I do not want to put limits on what God can and cannot do. I mean that's the thing.
I'm not putting limits. I'm just saying that if this were to change,
that's a limit. This can't happen. There can't be any changes. President Nelson can't possibly be wrong. And now, I mean. I don't.
Well, you are implying that President Nelson, on that he might be wrong. He might not be right.
I'm the worst, and I hope if the brethren have a problem with what I've been doing, they'll call that to my attention. And I hope if my bishop
and I do as well. If I'm doing something wrong, they can bring it to my attention.
Okay.
Ultimately, I don't see. You have not provided anything specific that I've done.
But what Stephen proposed, a very reasonable hypothetical that you compared to me being willing to deny the resurrection of Christ.
I said I would consider it and pray about it. I don't know what my answer would be because it's a hypothetical. And ultimately, I would want to hear why. And I would want to seek my own personal revelation. I may take down the video if they were to ask me to do that. But I don't I don't know that I would, because I'd have to pray about it. Because ultimately, I don't blindly follow anyone. I seek revelation from the Lord. And the Lord has told me to follow his prophets, and so I do. He's taught me that President Nelson is telling the truth when he says the doctrine will not change. He has told me that I should engage in pushing back against people who imply that President Nelson is mistaken when he says that the doctrine will not change. And so my thing is
do you think President Nelson appreciates the things that you've said in the whole Aaron Sherinian?
I have no idea. I would love to talk to President Nelson. And I haven't, what have I said about Aaron Sherinian that is so beyond the pale and problematic? And what did I say specifically that is a major issue? Just pointing out the fact that we have a huge issue of confusion in the church, and many people are interpreting his hiring as this is the signal that the church is going to change its position. Like, I think that is a perfectly legitimate thing to point out.
I don't represent President Nelson. I can't read President Nelson's mind, and that's not my question. My question is, do you think he would appreciate what you're doing?
I have no idea what President Nelson thinks about my Twitter and by the way, I apologize for my Twitter if there's anywhere I don't want people to think too much of me. I'm on the toilet, I'm angry sometimes, and Twitter is what it is. When you look, though, at what I've done, I went back and looked through it and say if I made any mistakes. And if I make a mistake, I'll admit it. But no one has pointed to anything specific that I've done. And yet I'm being chided as an activist against the church. And I say, okay, well, what did I do? And then it's like, well, you're having the wrong conversation. It's like, what?
Okay. So Jim, I want to ask you a question, because I think this is really broadening out in Christianity in general, is that we've seen the decline of the main line. I say from the main line to the old line to the dead line. And many of these churches decided to take a more progressive position when it came to women having leadership roles in the church, and also opened up the church to openly practicing LGBTQ clergy and membership. And many people look at this and say, if the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were to follow that path, it would probably lead to their ruin. And I look at the Community of Christ in the mid '80s. They decided to liberalize their church, and the church is declining. I mean, it's in serious financial trouble. They're going to be closing a ton of congregations in the next 5 to 10 years. I've heard estimates of 80% of their congregations will be shut within the next 10 years. So when I look at Jacob, he sees that. And he also sees how the evangelical church, by taking a more conservative traditional position on these issues, has allowed them to maintain and grow. And then in the global south, the charismatics and the evangelical churches are exploding. So the question would be, do you understand why Jacob would feel this sense of, we got to defend the traditional stances of this church, lest we go the way of the mainline Protestant denominations in America?
100%.
And Stephen, can I actually make a quick comment on that?
Sure.
The public appeal behind any of this is totally irrelevant in my mind. In this sense, I think it was Pope John Paul who said, if we have to go back by being faithful to Christ, if we have to go back to just 12 people and start all over again, let's do it. And I say, yes. I'm not interested in how the things affect the numbers per se fundamentally. Like, I do, but that's a matter of tactics, not truth. The very first thing we have to be is loyal to the truth. How we spread that truth, that's a separate subject. And one of the issues is, and that's what I'm trying to bring up in this whole conversation, is it true? Is our definition of marriage true? And if it is, then we're all in agreement that this is what the truth is, then we can be unified and we can have conversations about the best tactics to spread that truth to the world. But my point is, in the church, we are not united around that truth. And I believe that there are many voices out there, on the shelves at Deseret Book even, who are going about saying that certain things can change when President Nelson says it can't change. And when you say that it can change, what you're implying is that maybe it's not true. Maybe our definition of marriage isn't the actual definition of marriage. My whole point is just to point out that we as a group need to get behind what the brethren are teaching and work as an entire church to support what President Nelson says when he says it's not going to change, and stop implying that it can change. Because when you imply that it can change,
Nelson, when he hires Aaron Sherinian, just make sure that you pick and choose what you're going to support.
What was that?
Stephen, I want to go back to your question because I had a conversation on my podcast with Greg Prince, who's the author of David O. McKay and the Rise of Modern Mormonism. And we actually are having a series of discussions with him. It's a wonderful book. He talked about a conversation he had with Grant McMurray, who was the former head of the Community of Christ. I think it was still the Reorganized Church at the time. He was the first president of that group that was not a direct descendant of Joseph Smith.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And Grant McMurray said to him, "Yeah, when we ordained women, about a third of the church left."
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, "And if we knew which third was going to leave, we would have done it a whole lot earlier," which I thought was kind of interesting. And to continue to answer your question, though, about do I understand why Jacob feels this way? 100%. Absolutely, I understand why he feels this way. My problem is not with how Jacob feels or what Jacob believes. My problem is with the tactics being used to be able to advance this sort of thing. Because in the church, this is a very hierarchical church, and this is a church where people have priesthood and stewardship. And when we decide, okay, here is a problem in the church, and it is my responsibility to fix that problem. There's division in the church over whether or not President Nelson is right or wrong, or is telling the truth or is not telling the truth. And so therefore, I can 100% see why people would see that or feel that and be concerned by it. What becomes the problem is when you say, okay, well, the way to deal with that is to invite criticism and invite contention around the people they choose to represent them. It's to create discussions where we highlight and call into question Aaron Sherinian's faithfulness, Aaron Sherinian's commitment to the family proclamation, Aaron Sherinian's, and we somehow demonstrate that we don't trust that the brethren can handle this or could have made this right decision, and that they need me or anyone to call to their attention the signals that they may be sending. They need us to call to their attention how problematic and troubling this is, because that's just this huge leap beyond the stewardship that anybody here, or that 99.9% of anybody listening to this has. Unless you have been given the priesthood keys to be able to manage the affairs of the kingdom, you do not have the authority to in any way influence whether or not who the church hires. I mean, you don't even get a chance to stand up at General Conference and vote opposed to Aaron Sherinian. He is not brought up for a sustaining vote because none of us have stewardship over him. The people who do have stewardship over them are the prophets and apostles that Jacob repeatedly says that he sustains, even as he calls into question the decision that they're making. And he's so upset that anybody could privately believe that President Nelson could be wrong, even as Jacob publicly continues to foment this idea that they could have been wrong about Aaron Sherinian, and may very well have been wrong about Aaron Sherinian. I mean, if it's so problematic that Jim Bennett may believe something that the brethren could be wrong. It's just bizarre to say you're sustaining these same brethren, even as you conduct high-profile conversations, the direct implication of which is the brethren don't know how to handle this, don't know how to run the church, don't know who they should be picking, don't know what signals they're sending, aren't appropriately handling the division that is in the church. And there's absolutely division in the church. I believe there is division in the leadership of the church over this issue, but that's an entirely separate discussion. The point,
so Jim,
yeah,
I just want to ask you a question. Do you believe that Kate Kelly and Sam Young were actually conducting activism against the church? Do you think that they were opposed to the church and that they were, what they were trying to do was try to undermine the church and the brethren? What are your thoughts on the activism of Kate and Sam Young? Do you think that was a good thing that they did it, or do you think it was a good thing that they were excommunicated?
I am never, ever going to second guess church discipline. I'm never, ever going to say somebody should have been excommunicated, somebody shouldn't have been excommunicated.
Do you think it was a mistake for John DeLynn to be excommunicated?
Are you asking me if John DeLynn should be excommunicated?
Do you think it was a mistake that he was excommunicated?
Again, I am never, ever. I have been in disciplinary councils myself where decisions have been made, and I'm well aware of how that process works, well aware of the fact that there is information and stewardship there to which I do not have access. So I would never presume to second guess anybody's excommunication or anybody's church discipline. I'm not going to weigh in on that.
Okay, so then the question I have for you is, basically just as an outsider looking at this, Jacob Hansen is basically, he has a problem with somebody that the church hired. That's not a doctrinal thing per se. It's just, I have a question about a hiring of an individual in the church. Isn't that a legitimate question? If my Chicago Bears were to hire some coach and I question that, I mean, it doesn't mean that I'm no longer a fan. I just question, why did they choose that person as the coach? Or why did they choose that guy as the quarterback? I don't see what the issue is in questioning, who they hire in the public relations department. Is that, I mean, we're just talking about a hiring here on some level, ultimately.
Well, there are so many decisions of the church where people have different opinions as to what the brethren ought to have done, and you can say, okay, well, this is fine to question the brethren on something that's this relatively insignificant. I mean, you can take whatever position you want. What I don't think you can do is say that when you do that you are not questioning the brethren. Again, back to my maxim.
Well, can I really quickly just interject here? There's been a lot said about me and like what I think and what I'm trying to do. I'll clarify. I do think, Stephen, you brought up a very good question, and that is a fair framing of what I'm doing. I'm going, hey, this is like, I do call this into question, but I'm not. I sustain the brethren in that I'm not going to oppose them making that decision. I do want to get clarity as to maybe, I mean, maybe he's just so good at his job. It's so important that any controversy around it, it's kind of like not a big deal. Any of the sort of mixed signaling that some people feel, that can all be dealt with. That's
mixed signaling, signals coming from the brethren.
Yeah,
so
maybe so. I don't know. Okay, my point is that regardless of what anyone says, there are things that people are confused about this, and my whole thing is this. I have this question about this hiring decision, and let's say I did think it was a mistake. Jim, is it possible for somebody, and I'm not saying that I do think it is a mistake, I'm saying I don't know if it was a mistake or not. And what I am saying, though, is I'm going, okay, what if I did think it was a mistake? Is it possible for a person to still sustain the brethren while thinking that they made some mistake on some policy?
I don't think there's anybody in the church that hasn't felt that the brethren have made mistakes on some policy.
Okay, so if I feel that they've made a mistake here, I could still be sustaining the brethren while thinking they may have made a strategic error here. I still would sustain Joseph Smith, even though the Kirtland Bank I think was a mistake. Now here's the thing. I'm not saying that I even think it's a mistake. What I think the bigger issue here is, the way it's being interpreted, okay? The bigger issue is that I'm trying to address is, number one, that we're divided as a church. Number two, that division is caused over people's either rejection of or questioning of if it's really true that marriage is defined between a man and a woman. And number three, I'm trying to have a conversation with you and with others as to how to resolve that issue. And in my mind, the way to resolve the issue is to have more conversations about why President Nelson should be trusted and why, when he says that the doctrine cannot change.
But
that I think will bring unity, because then people will come together in the root of the issue. They'll say, look, the doctrine isn't going to change. The church can hire whoever they want. President Nelson says it isn't going to change. It's not going to change. There's no need to be worried. But then there are other voices out there who are calling into question President Nelson, including you.
Okay, Jacob, again, I am the worst person in the world. But
well, will you stop? Would you say that one of the things that you've been doing wrong is implying that this can change?
I've been doing everything wrong. I'm not here to defend
myself. Will you stop fomenting that issue? So you agree with me? You agree with me?
No, I don't agree with you at all, Jacob. I have no interest in discussing the wickedness of Jim Bennett. I zero interest. You want to accuse me of whatever? I'm not here to justify. I don't have to justify myself to you. I do not. I'm under no stewardship to you. I do not have to justify what I believe. I do not have to justify what I say.
So why are you coming after my wickedness?
So my problem with you, Jacob,
my wickedness
is that Aaron Sherinian is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And you have hurt him. And what you are doing continues to hurt him.
And I'll say this, I'm not trying to hurt Aaron Sherinian.
I decided the last thing in the world I wanted to do was have any kind of a discussion with you, because I don't think you are capable of having a productive discussion. I think you see everything as a debate. I think you see everything as a chance to dig a pit for your neighbor and take advantage of someone because of their words, and to try to find some way, to find some kind of little wedge to be able to exploit your position and win. I think you don't ever engage in a conversation that doesn't have a winner and a loser. And
Did I do that in my
I have no interest in having those conversations.
But these sort of accusations are that's incredibly hurtful to me. That's incredibly hurtful to me. When Jim, I have conversations with atheists, with Muslims, with ex-Mormons, with apostates. Like, I've talked to everyone under the sun, and we have really good conversations.
No, you don't. You don't. You have debates, and you have some really good debates, and you're very good at it. I mean, I thought your debate with Alex O'Connor.
Did I have a debate with the Muslim that I had on my channel recently?
I don't watch your channel, Jacob. I don't.
Then how can you claim that I can't have good conversations? Jim, you're attacking me personally.
No, Jacob, I'm the worst person in the world, and I'm wrong about everything. I mean, I don't want. I don't.
Well, then why are you attacking me personally?
What I am doing is I'm trying to get you to stop. I'm trying to get you to stop hurting a good man. I'm trying to get you to stop fomenting the division that you're decrying. The idea that you somehow think that what you're doing is going to lead to greater unity on this issue is just, I think it's absurd to any reasonable person.
Jim, the way that we get to unity, we have to resolve the division. And the problem is that if we ignore the core causes of the division, we can't resolve the division.
You are one of, on this specific issue, you are one of, if not the leading cause, one of the leading causes of division over the whole Aaron Sherinian.
Again, attacking me personally. Listen, Jim,
I'm not saying you're a bad father. I'm not saying you're a liar. I'm not saying you're ugly. I'm not attacking you personally. I'm saying you are exacerbating the division. I think I could prove that in a court of law if I were called upon to do so.
But because I'm pointing to what the root causes of it are. If we go to the root causes and we deal with those, we can resolve the division by creating unity around what President Nelson has taught. That's my point here. We're divided because of this issue. And unless we actually get down to why we should trust President Nelson when he says that this will not change, then the hiring decision won't be an issue at all. No one would even worry about it.
You think everybody needs to trust President Nelson on one thing, but you don't trust President Nelson with Aaron Sherinian, so you have no credibility when you start saying,
no,
well,
I
geez,
do. I do trust. I trust President Nelson to make the decision around Aaron Sherinian and the brethren to do that. That's why I'm not opposing it. I've said this from the start. There's been this narrative throughout this whole thing that I oppose the brethren. The brethren can make the decision. I have questions about why they made that decision. I have concerns about how it exacerbates the divisions and the way that it's interpreted by people, but ultimately they can make that decision. My point is just this. There's a huge division here, Jim. And if we don't resolve it, it's going to continue to grow. And all I'm trying to point to is that the division exists because the brethren have made very specific statements about the family proclamation, about our doctrine on marriage, and there are those who think, and they've said it won't change, and they say, well, maybe it will.
We do it on a Saturday with fighting with each other.
Okay, my wife is here and telling me we need to be done.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up then.
Okay.
Stop this fight.
Jim, would you like to, I mean, Stephen, you can take over, but maybe let Jim, because if he has to run, to have some final thoughts.
Jim, yeah, you know what? Your wife is asking for you to stop. And so was there any final words you wanted to say to the audience?
I'm sad that I failed. My only goal here was not to justify myself. It was not even necessarily to prove Jacob wrong. My only purpose here was to defend a good man and to defend the church that hired him. And I think that got lost. I think that I did not succeed. And for that, I'm disappointed.
And
Jacob, any final word on your part?
Yeah, my final thoughts is that I think Jim has come in here saying that I'm attacking a good man. There's sort of an implication here that I'm the one who's on attack and that I'm attacking Aaron somehow personally, when ultimately what I'm doing is I'm not attacking Aaron, I'm not attacking the church. I'm recognizing that we have a deep division in this church. I think that some people have interpreted Aaron's hiring in a certain way, and that it is causing an exacerbation of division and confusion within the church. And I want to speak out to say, we need to stand behind the brethren, not worry that this Aaron Sherinian hiring is some signal that they're going to change, because they're not. And I fully sustain the brethren in their authority to choose Aaron. I'm sure that they have good reasons for that, with full knowledge of everything that's gone on. And so I want to cool the temperature by actually resolving the issue, by saying we need to recognize that people are dealing with doubts about if we can trust President Nelson when he says the doctrine will not change. And I'm here to speak out against those who imply that our doctrines on this matter might be false and therefore changeable. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I don't think it's unfair. And even if I did, and I'm not saying I do, even if I did believe that the hiring of Aaron Sherinian was a mistake, I can still sustain the brethren and think that maybe they made a strategic error. And I'm not saying that that's my position. It isn't my position. I actually think that they do probably have good reasons. I don't know what they are, but that's fine. I have enough trust in them. So I've been attacked today as sort of the bad guy who's an activist against the church. And I'm Nothing specific has been provided, and I hope that I've clarified what my intentions are and what issue I'm trying to deal with and resolve.
All right. Well, Jacob and Jim, this is a conversation we had today, and this is being documented. And for those of you who are going to watch this episode, you're going to probably come away from it from whatever team you feel you're on. I know this is a very divisive time in our country, as well as things in the church. And hopefully this will be a teachable moment for all of us during these very difficult times. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.